right? So it hits the water, it gets right in their face. And remember, I'm trying to pull down a fly a lot of times. If I go back to that Zoo Cougar, I want something, I'm going to shorten up the leader, 20 and 12 and 20 inches. So I'm going to shorten that up so it gets down in their face a little quicker. But that heavy sinking line is going to pull it right to the bottom. And it's super skinny, so it cuts through the surface film real quick and gets down.
That was David Perry describing how he presents the fly for smallmouth bass. Another fly fishing podcaster today on the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
Hey, how's it going today? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. If you get a chance, take a second here, stop and click the subscribe button in your app of choice if you haven't done so. This will assure that you get the next episode delivered right to your inbox. So I'll check in with you at the end of the show and let you know what we have coming up next if you're interested. So stay tuned for that. We've got David Perry on, host of the Southeastern Fly podcast, and he's here to break down smallmouth bass fishing. We find out how he fishes the Zoo Cougar and some of his favorite flies, a couple of them that I hadn't heard of before. And we also hear about what he's got planned next for upcoming on the podcast. So without further ado, here is David Perry from SoutheasternFly.com. How's it going, David?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Good.
Good to talk to you.
Yeah. We chatted. I think it was a couple months, or I don't know, whenever that was, and I've been kind of keeping this going with the connection to the other podcasters around, in the fly fishing space, and I haven't talked to everybody yet. I don't think I'm even close to that, but I'm slowly trying to connect with everybody. And yeah, man, you got some good stuff. You're down the southeastern part of the U.S. We're going to dig into some smallmouth today, hopefully, and maybe some on Tennessee. But before we get there, talk about how you first got into fly fishing.
Oh, wow. I guess it started when we lived in Michigan as a kid. My parents packed up a trailer and moved us from Memphis, Tennessee up to Michigan, and we lived about 3 or 4 different places in Michigan, but we landed in Midland for the most part, and there were ponds around the house, and my dad had a big orange Daiwa fly rod that he used to fish with. So I drug it out of the storage one day and started trying to fish with it, and did the whole book under the elbow, hold the book under your elbow to your side thing, and took it out some, but it never really stuck, but the fishing did. So that was really my first little bit. And then later in life, in my 30s, I guess, starting to date myself here, we moved to Knoxville, and I fished the Smokies and the Clinch and the Tellico all around the Cherokee National Forest, tailwaters and all the parks all the streams in the park, I should say. Fished those and met up with a really good friend that took the time to teach me to fish and teach me to look at things maybe a little differently than what I had been as far as the natural resources go around Knoxville, and that's where I think that's where I really started getting into it, and once I picked the fly rod up and put the spinning reel down, I think that's where it really started, was there in Knoxville.
And you got into guiding now, right? You're doing some guiding?
Yeah, so believe it or not, we moved to Middle Tennessee. We're south of Nashville, about 30 minutes in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I fished around here for, 2 or 3 or 4 years, and bought a drift boat and fished in the drift boat a couple of more years. And one day a friend of mine, I was fishing with him, and Dave, it's one of those friends that when they say something to you, you listen to what they say. And Gary said, you ought to be guiding people, David. You enjoy watching people catch fish. You enjoy helping people catch fish. You should be guiding. And I said, yeah, I'm enjoying my own fishing. Why would I want to guide? But I started thinking about it, and then about 6 months later, he came on the boat again, and he said, and about halfway down the river, he said, have you thought about guiding? And I said, I have been kind of giving it some thought. And he said, I really think you ought to do it, because, you can sit in that seat all day long and never get up and never fish, which I didn't even realize I was really doing. people would have to talk me off the oars, basically. And once they did that, once I realized that, I'm really doing that. Why not? So I learned to cook shore lunches and that sort of thing. And, I was already tying flies, and one thing led to another. I put my shingle out, and a guy called while I was on the river, helping a friend learn how to row in his new boat. And my wife texted me on the river and said, "Hey, some guy called you to book a fly fishing trip." And I was absolutely stunned. And it turned out to be a fantastic trip. So, yeah. So I named it Southeastern Fly, and I don't know, here we are. We've got, the guide business and all kinds of other things going on. So, yeah, it's been a wild ride, but it's been a good ride.
What's on that drift boat? What do you have there?
Well, we've got a 16-foot Hyde high side, and the reason why I've got a high side, I've looked at every kind of boat you could possibly think of looking at, but we fish really big water in the winter. Like in the summer, we fish, 240 CFS across the river that's probably the width of a football field. But in the winter, it can get up to 12,000 CFS.
Oh, wow.
So I fish that high side. I feel a little more comfortable in the high side. And I've made some changes to it so it doesn't have benches in it anymore. It's got a Yeti up front and then a pedestal or a box seat in the middle. And I've kind of got it, getting it after, this is my second boat. So after, I guess 4, 5, 6 years, something like that, I've had it. I'm finally getting it to where I really got it set up the way I want it. So it'll be time to get rid of it here in a year or two, probably. I've threatened to get rid of it over the past 3 years and just haven't been able to pull the trigger. So, and you know how boats are. You kind of continue to modify them and tweak them until you get them just the way you think you want them, and then you find out that there's no perfect boat.
No, that's right. I think we have about maybe 15 or 16 episodes on a little mini podcast series we did on drift boats. So I interviewed a number of guests. We dug into a little bit of the history. So I've got all that that we've covered. And it's interesting. I think it's actually started in Oregon and slowly worked its way out, around. And I think that what's the closest drift boat company to you out there? I'm trying to think. Is it Stealth?
No, it is. Dave, let me see. What is the name of those? Oh man, they build a terrific boat.
Oh, I know which one it is. It's
High Country Boats.
Oh, High Country. Okay.
Yeah, they're over in North Carolina, and I've actually seen their boats, but I've never rode one of their boats. But I tell you what, their craftsmanship is absolutely. It's crazy smooth lines, good looking boat. They're in their guides, so they build. Basically they're kind of a batch boat builder. They build them one at a time, and it's just it looks like it's a couple guys, but really nice looking boats.
I can't think about all those podcasts we did. I can't think of one boat I looked at and where I was like, oh man, this thing isn't the greatest. I mean, we had, other fiberglass boats. We had some great wood. K. June is up there. He's got this crazy wood stitch and glue boat, which is beautiful. And then you got these aluminum boats out west. There's a lot more of the aluminum boats as well. But yeah, cool. So that's your drift boat. And so you got this going. Then how did the, Southeastern Fly, how did the podcast come to be?
Oh, wow. Yeah, we've got a podcast too. Huh. Well, I guess, probably one of the ways that I kept feeding the fly fishing, was, how you start doing something and you just want to get all the information you could possibly get, right? That was the way I was. And, somebody told me about a podcast, and this was years ago, called the Itinerant Angler. And, and Zach was doing that, and I think that's his name.
Yep.
Yeah. Zach was doing that podcast, and he had really good guests on. And I started just trying to get all the information I could. And then whenever I started guiding, I really started honing my skills a little bit, trying to anyway, and using the podcast to do that. And then I was actually asked this question yesterday on the river, interestingly enough, why are you doing a podcast? Which then the guy asked me straight up like that too. And I said, because I use the podcast to get better. Right, not that I'm the greatest or anything like that, but they made me better, and any information that I can put out there that might make somebody better in fly fishing or even guiding, I want to try to do that. Just it's kind of like paying it back, because I really garnered a lot of information off of that. It wasn't just Zach's. It was there were several others out there. Some have come and some have gone now. And some of and there's differences in guests, and some tell you a little more, give you a little more insight than others, and some are more technical, some are more stories. So, I try to make a blend of that with our podcast, but we also really want to get something that is technical too, that really helps an angler. That's kind of my focus on it now.
Gotcha. So it's kind of, you got into it focused on a little bit kind of helping learning for yourself, learning more for, scratching your own itch, but really it's focused on now maybe, when you think about an episode and how you choose them, are you thinking about your clients, or how do you know what to choose for the next episode?
Well, so when I started listening to them, I was just fishing, trying to get better. But whenever I started the podcast, whenever I started it, it's kind of it's evolving. So to answer that question, I don't want to go too far out of the way here, but to answer that question, I thought that people really just wanted to know about people, and they do to a certain extent. But as I thought back about the episodes that I really listened to more than once, they were more technical. They were more how-to. They were more, and Kelly Gallup, perfect example of somebody willing to give up information, that might help me. So, we all got on that sinking line, light fly thing for a long time because he put it out there and it worked. Whenever you try something and it works, that's really what you want to do. So it's kind of evolving, and really I tell you what pushes our podcast, and I don't know, maybe everybody does this, but we started a Facebook group called Podcast by Southeastern Fly. And one of my guests said, "Man, you really ought to do a podcast or a group for this podcast, Facebook group." And I'm probably slow to move, honestly, Dave, on a lot of things, and I was slow to move on that, but I started it, and we had a couple of folks come in, and now it's starting to build, and I just asked the questions out there of, hey, what do you want to listen to? What do you want to hear? And that group now is driving our podcast for the most part. I still get to sneak something in there every once in a while that I just kind of like to hear about. But whenever I start asking questions for, like the first of this year, I said, what do you want to hear about? What types of fishing do you want to know about? And they gave, I put a poll out there, and they added all the stuff in there that they wanted to add. And that's directed us, through the first part of this year. And then it's going to direct us a little more. I'm just working on getting the guests. So yeah, I think the biggest thing is to getting the right guest, somebody that's willing to give information, but knowing that, we know going in that they're not going to give us everything, right? Nobody's going to give up every single bit of information, but the ones that give up good information are the ones that we're looking for.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, no, I'm totally agree. I was just, it's funny you said Kelly Gallup, because we had an episode way back. I think it was whatever it was, episode 52. And I just listened to it again because I'm putting together a little resource. And yeah, man, it was the same thing. There were so many things I totally forgot about that were little tips and tricks. And we do the same. We do a little bit of, the tips and tricks, and then we also get into a little bit of the stories. But that's why, like today with you, I could sit here and talk to you about podcasting all day, and I would be interested in that. But, people wouldn't listen probably as much. But if I go in and we talk about smallmouth bass fishing in the Tennessee area, it's going to get people listening and re-listening, because I know people have come out to me and said, hey, do a smallmouth bass episode. That's what we need. And I've got some other people coming up to help out. So yeah, man, that's why today I think we're going to dig into it. So I've got a few other questions, just, more podcast focused, but maybe we should just dig into a little fishing just to make sure we scratch the itch of the person listening right now. Does that sound good?
Dude, I'm all for talking about smallmouth.
Okay.
100%.
Good. So maybe we just start us off. And I haven't fished that area. I've heard a lot about it. I mean, obviously, you mentioned a lot of kind of really famous cities, Nashville, Knoxville, all these, Memphis. I mean, you're in this amazing place for music, which, maybe we could talk more about music later. But yeah, maybe just bring us back to as far as smallmouth bass, what's your kind of your home water, without giving out any secrets or whatever, and talk about how you kind of catch smallmouth there.
Well, so being in Middle Tennessee, so like I said, we're just south of Nashville, about 30 minutes, and there's probably cover 2-hour drive in all directions, but it seems like I mostly go west. I mostly go east. I don't go too far north because you're going to run into Nashville, and I'm more of a secluded place to fish. But not that there aren't some really cool streams right there in Nashville and around, south and southwest Nashville a little bit. But going east, the Barren Fork, there's some pretty good smallies there. That connects with the Collins River. That upper watershed there is kind of the upper Caney Fork watershed. That's part of it. The Duck River is a little more west. It's pretty good. There's some trout up top around Normandy Dam, and then as the water gets warmer and warmer, the smallmouth kind of move in, and then that flows into some really, really warm, hot water, I guess you could say, more than, a little bit more than what smallmouth like. And then another river that we fish in some of the tributaries is the lower Elk River on down before it runs into the Tennessee River. So we've really got, 4, 5, 6 pieces of water there that we can fish that have multiple floats on them, and all kinds of different water. You're fishing everything from shoals to riffles to runs to big, long, slick pools, rock banks, chunk rock on the bottom. There's a lot of different things that you can do.
So you have it all. It sounds like you got a little bit of everything. Is there, like today, if you were going to go fish, I'm not sure when the best time to fish it is, but if you're going to pick one to fish today, where would you be heading?
I'm thinking about the water levels and all that. Still, to me, it's a little bit early, so I'd probably head a little bit south and try the Duck, one of the floats on the Duck.
What is the best time of year? If you said, you want to go hit some smallmouth, when would you, throughout the whole year?
Gosh, I'd say the next 2 months.
Okay, so we're getting there.
In there.
Yeah, we're getting there. So right now, when we're recording this, we're going into May pretty soon. So we're pretty much so May, June, that period are kind of the best times.
Yeah, I just realized this is the end of April. I was thinking like this is the 1st of April, but it's not. You're right.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I would be on the Duck, and it's cranking up some. We even caught a smallmouth the other day on a trout float, so it's definitely cranking up.
Okay, and that's Duck. Was it Duck?
The Duck River.
The Duck River. Okay.
So that's known. There's 151 fish species in that river.
Wow.
So it's the most diverse river apparently in North America or the United States, one of the two. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, and it's not all sport fish. There's a lot of different species in there, and it's long. It's a long watershed. So
yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so the Duck River, and then when you're on the Duck, is that a river that you pretty much have to have a boat, or can you do that from the bank as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that wade the Duck in a lot of different places. A lot of kayaks stop and pull over and fish. Same thing on the lower Elk. I like that river as well. But all the rivers are very similar in a lot of ways. So you can take what works on one and pack up your stuff and go to one of the other ones and still be, you're looking for the same types of water and that sort of thing. So if you're doing really well, let's say in a run, maybe drifting a tequila fly through a run under an indicator on the Duck, you can take that to the Collins and find that same thing, or you can take that to the lower Elk and find the same thing. Once you find that piece of water, you can take those techniques and put them to use in different places.
Gotcha. So indicator. So you're doing some nip fishing. Is that probably one of the more popular methods there?
Well, it is right now. So a tequila fly. I don't know if you know what a tequila fly looks like.
No.
It's kind of like a woolly bugger with longer legs.
Okay. How do you spell that?
Tequuely, tequila.
Okay.
It's pretty popular around here. I enjoy fishing it because I can fish it under an indicator. I can have somebody fishing it under an indicator. I can have somebody strip it. I can have somebody crawl it along the bottom. So there's a lot of different ways. So you can imitate a lot of different things that really make it fish well.
Got it. It's got rubber legs. It's got the rubber. Like, is that typical that it's got a little bead and rubber legs, or is it? And color wise, is it a bunch of different colors that fly?
You can color. You can like
whatever.
any fly. You can put it in whatever. And I've got some in green, got some in yellow, but I've got some brown that really works good, and it's like brown flash. You know what, Dave?
Yeah.
I just happen to have some of this.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah, it's essentially a woolly bugger with rubber legs, right?
Yep, that's what it is. And Arrick's Fly Shop, Arricks Fly Shop, is the one that does the chenille, and they're in West Yellowstone. and it's a brown, flashy chenille. And man, that stuff I don't know what it is. And I probably just gave away somebody's secret. But I
That's
saw
it. That's what we want. That's the key to this episode, right? You just gave
Yeah.
somebody a little nugget.
Yeah, I don't remember which YouTube video I stole this off of, but I was like, well, I kind of like that, and they told me where to get it. So, a cone head on top, with a tail, marabou tail. I throw some wire in there just to make it a little bit more durable. Put some lead on it if I want to crawl it, like along the bottom or something. So yeah.
All right, gotcha. So when you get set up there, so let's say we're kind of nymph fishing. What does that setup look like, and how are you doing it? So you're in the boat, and are you? So you're not really like swinging flies necessarily. You're just casting out and stripping in.
Well, so that's the beautiful thing about it. Tequila or a woolly bugger, or even the bigger nymphs, stonefly nymphs and stuff like that. Those work as well. So let's take those three. If it's somebody new, and they're not ready to cast Zoo Cougars on sinking lines, or poppers even, they're not quite there yet. I'll put a big indicator on top and just let them float it out beside the boat, or try to get them to float it in front of the boat, and get them, if you can get them to get it out there, without, killing everybody, as it comes through the boat, and most people are pretty good. I do a lot of work with beginners. So you get, you figure out right quick that, all right, this person can handle this fly, or this person can't handle this heavy fly yet. By the end of the float, I expect them to be able to do it. I have high expectations, whenever we go out there. So a lot of folks, you'll just nymph it. You might tie it 6 foot under an indicator and just let it go out there and just let it go down and hunt up a fish. If they're a little bit better, a lot of times we'll put it on a floating line and just slowly strip it. That seems to work. Even on large nymphs, we'll do that too, and that's a pretty good one. Woolly buggers, obviously, you can do whatever with them, either them as well. So, yeah, we'll do. I mean, there's a million different ways to fish all this stuff. So we just try to figure out what's best for whoever's in the braces. We just want them to figure out, all right, what's the most productive thing I can do for them to catch some fish.
Yeah, I got you.
That's really kind of where I am.
There's tons, yeah, like you said, there's tons of ways to do it. You could, yeah, I mean, the indicator's great. Or, I mean, if you're going out there, say it's just you, you don't have clients, you're just doing some research or whatever. How are you setting up your stuff?
There's 2 things I'm going to use. I'm going to use a Zoo Cougar on a sinking line, just because, and I usually use a yellow one, just because I can see it and I can watch it. And that's visual to me, and I love doing that. That's kind of my jam right there. Just get in the right water and start chunking some heavier lines and get it down there. And the Zoo Cougar usually will hunt that thing up, and you'll be good to go. And then the other way is poppers. I absolutely love fishing poppers. Man, I don't think there's anything more visual, anything more fun. You have high expectations. When they hit, you're surprised every time. They'll these smallies will rush off the bottom a lot of times and come up and just nail it, and they're headed back down with it before you're ever ready to set the hook. They're so much fun. They fight good. They eat good. It's just a good eat all the time. So yeah, if you can get it on poppers, man, that's the thing. Everybody loves that. I haven't found anybody that said, yeah, I want to change off a popper once they've caught one.
On those poppers, what type of water are you looking for?
So that's the thing about those. It's try to hit a little bit slower water. And somebody out there is going, well, I always fish fast water with hoppers, which is fine. I mean, they work in that. But if you can find, I'm looking for like rock walls. So around here, there are rock ledges, I guess I should say. There are a lot of rock walls, but the ledges, maybe they're 2 or 3 feet up. If you think about a ledge up above the water, it looks the same below the water, right? They're very similar. I mean, may have different outcroppings and that sort of thing, but they're very similar. So if you think about that, you think of these fish are, I like to say they're leaned up against that ledge, drinking a milkshake, waiting for something to come by. And it doesn't, and they're looking up. I mean, the fish are looking up at the right times of year, which is now until probably June. Now that you've told me It's already May. It's basically May already.
Yeah.
So, if you think about that, there's plenty of places for them to get in nooks and crannies and still see what's coming by, either on top or even, if you're fishing something tequila, let's say you're floating it, or a regular stonefly or something like that. You think about a good place for them to get in, and they have that protection. They kind of have some oxygen hopefully flowing by there if they need it. There's some food coming by, but that protection's still important to a smallmouth. I mean, let's don't joke. They're not sharks. They're not they have some enemies out there, so they're going to still look for some cover. So yeah, I'm looking for those ledges. I'm looking for chunk rock in the bottom. You'll see some, especially this time of year when the bottoms of the rivers are a little more clean, a little less vegetation. You can find that chunk rock a little easier. So we'll fish those. So those are really kind of a couple of things that I'm looking for when I'm fishing poppers. But I'm not really not looking for it whenever I'm fishing other types of
it's always
flies
structure.
either. Yeah.
You're always looking for that structure. Is it usually structure, around ledges and rocks, or is there also wood? Is it pretty much any structure you're going to find smallmouth?
You're going to find them in a lot of different places. You're going to find them where you least expect finding those fish. But yeah, I mean, fishing wood works too. Same thing. You're going to probably get hung up a little more in wood. But if you're not losing a fly every once in a while, you're not fishing close enough. But yeah. So just but like I said, you just have to be ready at any point in time. They could be there. But yeah.
Okay. And so let's go back to that Zoo Cougar. So you've got that on. You've got this fly on that. I mean, would you call that this is more streamer fishing than nymphing, or is there like an overlap there?
Oh, it's 100% streamer fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that fly. So I guess what I've done with that fly, Dave, is I've really learned to fish it. So, and what I mean by that is I've learned that it's a floating fly on a sinking line. So if I want to throw over a log, I can throw over the log and start stripping back and strip that fly right up to the log where one more pull is going to get it stuck in the log. But if you stop just before the log, it'll start rising up. And it'll come over the log. Once you get it clear of the log, then you can start back down and start pulling it back down. So, you really, in trying to fish it, the shorter leaders, try to fish it more toward the bottom. The big splats, whenever you cast it in and kind of, I like to say, throw it like a softball, like get it going, get it up in the air and make it splat some, and really, start taking off like the fish. It's a little, maybe imitating a little fish, and it jumps and you start stripping it back. A lot of times you'll get that reaction strike there. So it's an interesting fly, but I've just really grown to like it. So there are thousands of other flies out there, thousands of other streamers out there. That just happens to be probably my favorite.
There you go. That's and I think I was just listening to that Kelly Gallup episode again, episode 52 that we did, and he actually said I think his top, if he had to pick one fly or whatever, was the Zoo Cougar. That's kind of number one. And he talked a little bit about design. That's interesting with him. He talked about how you go about it. He said the most important thing when you're talking about fly design, when you're making a new fly, is think about how you're going to fish it. And that's how he went into that. He was thinking about how he was going to fish it. And he does that, that his, whatever he calls it, his twitch, he kind of really works the fly. So when you're out there, are you doing that? Are you really working that fly with your rod tip? Or are you doing a lot more or mixing it up?
As far as fishing a Zoo Cougar, probably the only thing I haven't stolen directly from Kelly is the retrieve. And I just choose to do it with my hand, with my wrist. So anywhere from little bitty wrist strips, right? So moving that fly 2 inches at a time. And the fact that it has a spun deer hair head, so it wants to float, means that it wants to move back and forth. I can kind of get into a little rhythm with just wrist strips, moving it 2 or 3 or 4 inches, and it'll walk the dog for a long way that way. I don't know how it does it. And it may go sideways, if you're in rushing water, quite fast moving water. If you're in fast moving water, it's going to go head up. It almost has to once you get some line tight in it, and that sort of thing. So it'll start head down, but eventually it'll go head up. And you can't walk the dog there. But if you've got a little bit slower water, yeah, you can walk the dog for a long way with just little short wrist strips. Now, if that's not working, then I'll start going longer strips. If that doesn't work, and sometimes I think if I get frustrated or something, I'll start using the rod tip to do it. And I don't know that brings any less strikes, but I'm more wrist, more short, more. I don't really see the bait fish like taking off and going in a straight line without really wiggling for, more. I don't see them doing that for 2 foot, for 2 feet. They're wiggling back and forth. Even though they're moving that 2 feet, they're still wiggling back and forth. And if you just pull straight and it's not giving any movement, really to me, it's probably just not as much fun to watch. But when it comes down to it, if I'm out there fishing for myself, I'm trying to please David. I mean, if I catch I want to catch some fish, but I can entertain myself just casting around and trying to make it do different things.
Yep. Okay. And so again, back to as you're coming into it, let's say we're drifting down the river in your boat. So when you're coming up, you're looking for, if you're new to the section, how do you know, like riffle versus run versus pool? Are you kind of just fishing a little bit of everything, or where do you start when you're, coming down there?
If I'm you mean like I'm out exploring a river?
Yeah, if maybe you're on a new section and you don't really know it, and say it has a bunch of diverse kind of habitats. So it's got the big pools, it's got the riffles, it's got the runs. Or do you just fish every little spot, everything that looks good?
I fish every spot, and I do 2 things, Dave. One is I always try to look ahead, always, and I'm not always successful at it, but I try to look at what's next as I'm fishing where I am. But the second thing, and I think this is valuable right here, and a lot of people do it, and I highly recommend that whatever water you fish, on a weekly basis, get good at it, whatever it is, because the chances are, if you go somewhere within 2 hours of where you are right now, or where your weekly water is, your home water, if you go 2 hours from there, chances are you're going to find a lot of the same types of river. Right, so you're going to find a lot of the same types of runs. You're going to find a lot of the same types of shoals. You're going to find a lot of the same things going on in pools. And if you're good at your river, you can be good at one that's within 2 hours of you probably. Now, if you have a 10,000 foot change in elevation, it's a little bit different. So don't take that to the extreme. But if you just think about, I fish a certain type of run, and I like to fish a certain type of run at my home river, and I'm good at it, right? So you get good at things that you do. The next river you go to, you're going to be hunting up those same places. So get good where you are, and then work your way out, and then move on. Once you move on to, all right, I'm pretty good at runs now. I want to fish riffles. Okay, get pretty good at riffles. All right, I find my place with a riffle. The next river I go to, if it's got a run in it, I'm going to fish that. Now I'm good at riffles. I'm going to fish those too. I think that the last thing that people fish are those big, long pools that I was talking about a while ago. But those fish, if you can hunt up a little bit of current in there, like it may be a big still, especially around here. There are pools here that, they may be a football field long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But you can always find some current in them somewhere. But I was on the river yesterday. I fished a guy through a long pool. He caught some fish there. And there was a boat behind me, and I heard his motor start up, and I thought he's going to blow that whole pool, and he's going to be right on top of me. And sure enough, he blew through the whole pool. And if he had fish right behind us, he would have seen that there were a ton of fish in there. But he just blew right through it because it's a pool. He thought, well, there's no current here. So, try to get better. In my opinion, this is David speak here. I'm just trying to get better at every type of water. Get a presentation for every type of water, and you just get better with time, and you steal ideas from everybody.
Yeah.
And that helps.
Totally. Yeah, well, to that point, we had Charles Jardine, who's a big English, like UK guy, and we were talking nymphing, and he said the same thing. I mean, he said a lot of the stuff that because he fishes the West, he fishes the U.S. a lot as well. And he said pretty much everything we're talking about today, we were talking about more UK, but he said most of this can apply to fishing the West Yellowstone or something like that, right? I mean, so there are a lot of similarities even around the world, and that's the amazing thing. I mean, smallmouth bass, that's the beauty of them, right? I fish for smallmouth, and they're just this amazing species that's that's aggressive, and it's just super cool. So I guess if we talked about the pool, let's just dig into the pool a little bit. So we got this football field long pool. So when you're coming up to this thing, are you using like a Zoo Cougar in this thing as well?
Yeah. So, like I said, so even these big long pools, they may have just a little bit of current coming through them all across it, but there's going to be a spot or two in it where the current is kind of like a mainstream. And by mainstream, I mean it's not rushing, right? I mean it's just moving a little faster. That's all, and not much. I mean they're hard to pick out. You can look at bubble lines, you can look at scum lines, you can do those sort of things and kind of get a general idea where they are. So what that presents, and then you've got the other side maybe of the pool, and it may be all stagnant water, which is fine. There's going to be some largemouth, some gar, that sort of thing in there. I don't know what pushes them kind of away from some of the smallmouth lies, and they all, honestly, they all get together and kind of use the same water a lot of times too. But let's just focus on that current that I'm talking about. If you're focused on that current, you got to first find it. So you're looking for those scum lines, you're looking for those bubble lines. You're just looking for just a little bit of moving water in some of them. I mean, just a little bit. Hence the reason the guy cranked up his motor and blew through it yesterday, because it was so minute. I mean, there was very, very little going on. So I'll get in that current, find that current seam, and if I'm fishing or if I have somebody fishing a Zoo Cougar, they'll throw on the other side of the current stream, especially if there's a rock wall there or gravel bar coming across it, something like that. I'll have them fishing that Zoo Cougar. And you got to just kind of speed it up, slow it down, depending on how fast the line's sinking and that sort of thing. But I don't, there's nothing in the book that says you can't float a large nymph under an indicator there too, right? You just have to find that, find that seam.
That spot.
Yep. I try to find the edges of it too. So where the fast current's moving up against the no current, or slower current's moving up against no current, try to get on that seam of the moving water, and just, I think those fish just kind of sit on the edge and looking at that moving water and just say, hey, there's something I need to go grab. It's like a buffet.
Yep, exactly. Stuff's coming down, stuff's going up. Are you casting more, across or down or up? Or I guess, so let's take us to that spot. You found this little current seam in a big pool. Does it matter where you cast, how you cast to them?
Depends on what the fish are looking for that day, really. Yeah. I mean, you can cast, usually I start straight in, I look like a bass fisherman, like you see on TV, other than the hook set that they use. They use quite a exaggerated hook set, more than what I would, but I'm going to start out just fishing straight up, straight up to the bank. Sometimes you'll go head down, so you cast a little bit upstream and let the head go down some. Sometimes you'll just stop the boat, cast up a little bit, upstream a little bit to the bank, and then as you start stripping, if you got enough current, it'll look like that fish is like running downstream and then changes its mind and tries to come upstream.
Oh yeah.
When you're fishing that way. So there's a ton of different ways that you can fish it. And whenever I say that you stop the boat, cast a little bit upstream, it runs the head of the fly downstream and then turns upstream. That just happens to be what we did the other day. So that's why it comes to mind. Yeah. I think you can get creative on any fly that you want to use, even if you're dead drifting a nymph form. I mean, you can get it a twitch. There's so many different things you can do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're going to. I wanted to hit on our little segment, the 222 top 2 tips, flies, and resources in a second, but I wanted to touch base. Back a little bit on the podcast, because obviously this is, I'm always excited to hear about where you're going with that. But first, I guess, as far as just bass fishing, smallmouth, anything else, I know there's a ton here. Where would you direct somebody if they wanted to take this kind of the next step further? Or would you say just get out to your water and take what we talked about today and just explore, grab a Zoo Cougar and a sinking line and kind of hit for it?
I think if I was I tell you what, the guy that I guided yesterday is the perfect example. He's the perfect example of newer angler in fly fishing. So he's fished for bass, with gear, which is cool. I mean, he had some really cool stories, and there's a lot of stuff you can learn from the gear guys if you just take a minute and look. And it can be tough for some of us to look at the gear guys and say, yeah, what you're doing makes sense, because some of us tend to have that, we're fly fishermen mentality.
Yep.
But you can look at gear guys and find that. But I think Jesse was his name, and I think Jesse is a perfect example of someone that could take what he learned yesterday and decide, I'm going for smallies, and take some of that knowledge and just start working on it and be really good. So if I was Jesse, I would, and he lives in Nashville. He's closer to the Harpeth River, and there's some smallmouth in there, and there's some pretty good ones in there. I would find, an access point without a lot of folks, and I would start trying a couple of different things. I'd take that tequila, I'd take a woolly bugger, I'd take a large nymph, I'd take poppers. He doesn't have a sinking line, so I would not take a Zoo Cougar, because those are tough to fish on a floating line. You can put some weight on it and do all that, but that really defeats the purpose. I would take those, and I would pick out a stretch on the Harpeth or on the, whatever's close to you, and I would start working. Grab one of those. I'd probably start out with a tequila if it was me, and I would find the different types of water, and I would just start fishing them. And I would just try. I would go back and listen to this podcast and try to. Hopefully, I've said something that made some sense. And I would listen to other podcasts. I would get online. I would read, and I would get to the river as much as I could get to the river. And if that's once a month for one day, I'd be super focused that day. Right? I would get up early. I'd get there first. I'd have breakfast while I'm driving. Make sure I had plenty of water to keep myself hydrated. I'd have some crackers. I would have some chocolate, because you can't go fishing without chocolate. Take all those flies, and I would work that stream, and I would find something that I really like to work, and I would start there. If it was a run, I'd work the runs until I couldn't work them anymore, and then I would move on to something else, and I would just keep doing that. If it's once a week, I'd do the same thing. If it's every day for a month, you can get out. That's what I would do. I would keep focusing, because the more you're on the water and the more knowledge that you're trying to take in and you can put to use, the better you're going to be.
Yeah.
If Jesse was able to do that, Jesse would be an outstanding smallmouth fisherman. And he's only picked up the fly rod 3 or 4 times.
A couple times, yeah.
Yeah. He would be very good.
What's early when you get out there? What would be early on the water?
Try to get there by 6.
Yeah. So just get there. Yeah.
And if you can get there earlier, 6 is about right. I mean, the sun's coming up, and you can see what you're doing, but you don't have to be out there at 4 in the morning, although I used to do that. Okay.
So with smallmouth, is there anything there where, could you pretty much fish 6 a.m. versus 6 p.m.? It's all the same, or is there a big difference as far as when fish are active, things like that?
I think early's better and late is better. Middle of the day, don't kid yourself. You can catch them all day long. You can catch them when the sun's out, right? And it's a blue sky.
Yep.
Blue sky day. You can catch them then, but you're probably going to have a little more luck, honestly, whenever it's a little bit earlier, a little bit later, and you have a lot of more traffic in them after, during the day, especially if they allow like rental companies for canoes and kayaks or something like that.
Oh yeah.
That can spoil the middle of the day. So take your hammock with you and string it in a tree and take a nap.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I've got some friends that do that.
That's perfect. No, that sounds amazing. That's what I would be. Definitely, that's the great thing. Those hammocks you can take anywhere. What's your sinking line? What's the line you like to go with on your sinking line? With like, say you got the Zoo Cougar.
You have to remember, I'm different than everybody else. Okay, if you keep that in mind.
Okay.
So I'm using the Cortland level sinking line. It sinks about 5 to 6 inches a second. And it's super skinny. Like it's about the size of a little bit less than a number 2 pencil lead, if anybody knows what those are.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so that's pretty skinny.
Yeah, so see, I mean, everybody's fishing this nice fat stuff, and I've got some of that stuff, it's hard to work with when it's real cold, but I haven't found anything that sinks faster, right? So it hits the water, it gets right in their face. And remember, I'm trying to pull down a fly a lot of times. If I go back to that Zoo Cougar, I want something. I'm going to shorten up the leader. 20 and 12 and 20 inches. So I'm going to shorten that up so it gets down in their face a little quicker. But that heavy sinking line is going to pull it right to the bottom, and it's super skinny, so it cuts through the surface film real quick and gets down. Faster it gets down, I feel like the better off I am. But I still want that. We still want that play in the fly. So that's why I love that line, because it lets the fly do what the fly is going to do.
Right. So it's almost like not a Euro nymphing, but it is getting to that point where you want the fly to be just free to move based on what you do. You don't want the fly line to really take control of the situation. Is that kind of how you think of it?
Yeah, I want that fly to go down there and hunt that fish up. That's really what that's that fly's mission. Well,
and that's on the again, the mono stuff. I had God, what episode was it? We did a mono. It's a little like Euro nymphing, but it was trout bitten Dominic Swintoski. He's got the trout bitten site, and he talked about how he does what he calls mono nymphing, but it's like a mix between streamers and Euro nymphing, right? So he's using this. It sounds similar to what you're talking about with the Zoo Cougar, right? Where you have control of it, and again, that's what's beautiful about talking to you is that hearing your different the way you do it is amazing, because somebody may not have heard this before. So well, I guess let's take us to, just quickly as we start to kind of wrap this up here. You've talked about a few. I mentioned the 222. We're going to dig into that. But as far as flies, you had 2 flies, and I just be thinking about a couple of tips that we could add to this. But let's just quickly go back to the podcast. So.
Okay.
Take me where the podcast, obviously you've been doing it. How long have you been doing it now?
Gosh, it's the 31st episode, 3 years. I try to do one a month. Yeah.
One a month.
Yeah, you do quite a few more than that, but
yeah,
I just try to do one a month, and I've skipped some months and that sort of thing. But
yeah,
we try to stay regimented. Releasing the first Monday of the month as much as we can. So yeah, we've got about 30 something episodes.
Okay, and how did you come to the one a month versus say 2 a month or whatever else?
Well, it's tough to do them. One, it can be tough to get the right guest, right? So I've really tried to focus on those guests that we talk about, and I could do more. We don't really have advertisers. We had some in the beginning, and I've kind of stopped that because I really kind of just want to say what I want to say. I want the person on the other end of the conversation to say what they want to say and not have to worry about, well, I don't want to say this because this person or this company's, behind this episode.
Yeah.
So, I just really kind of just wanted to make sure we had good content. It takes me a while to think of what I want to ask. Thankfully, the podcast group really they haven't taken it completely over, but they're moving on that. So yeah, I think that's probably how I ended up on that one. It's just, I could do more, but I don't know if it would have as much information. And I think, honestly, Dave, I think we missed the mark sometimes. There's that one more question that somebody wishes I would ask that I just didn't think of, but all the guests have been super open, like, hey, if somebody needs some additional information, just let me know and I'll give it to them. So I feel pretty good about that.
Nice. What is your, have you had a smallmouth bass episode with anybody?
I have not.
There you go. So you got that's a good one to throw at the list, because it'd be nice right now. I could direct somebody right now to that one. They can go listen to that on your show.
Yeah. I've got that on the list. I just haven't done it. Crazy as this is, I'm on your show doing smallies and haven't done one on my own.
Well, and that's the struggle. That's the struggle, I think, with the monthly, because even if you do it weekly, that's only 52 episodes a year.
Right.
And I feel like that's hard, because I've got a whole list. I mean, I've got, spreadsheets of people and topics that, I probably won't get to ever. But that's the struggle. Yeah, I mean, we're doing 12 episodes a year. I mean, there's no way you can, there's just so much that you're not going to be able to get to, and obviously. So we're helping you here, right? So when you have when you have a guest, when you have one of your clients come up, all you got to do is say, "Hey, the Wet Fly Swing podcast, go check it out. I talked about smallmouth. You listen." And I mean, do you feel when you think about what we've covered today, and you have a client, would you feel comfortable sending it to this episode and to get a good perspective on what you're doing with smallmouth?
Yeah, I would. I would send them here first before the trip. Yeah, I would send a link and say, hey, go listen to this, and this will give you some idea of what we do. Anything that you can help, people want to know, hey, what do I need to be ready for? These things help. Like I've done that before. Hey, listen to this episode. We've got a couple episodes on tailwaters out there. That I did with a friend
I heard
of mine.
those.
Did you? Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And try to coach them up a little bit before. And if they're experienced anglers and they listen to it, they'll know. I mean, they'll be dialed in when they get on the boat, and they'll be like, all right, I know exactly what we're going to do. And they get with us quicker in the float. They get catching fish earlier in the float, I guess I should say. So yeah, it's again, try to use it like I've used it, and get what you can out of it. I think people take 20% of what they hear they retain, and then maybe 10% they use.
That's what's amazing. That's why the podcast, like you said earlier, that's the great thing about the podcast is that it's evergreen. I mean, that person, and I do it as well. I mean, I just listened to this old episode on Kelly Gallup from like 3 years ago, and it's there right now. Somebody can go listen to that episode and get a bunch of tips. And in fact, I'm breaking down a lot of the quick tips is what I call them. That we're going to cover here in a little bit, the 222. But what Kelly said on that episode, he said, he had a couple of tips like breaking water down. His favorite was like the Zoo Cougar and a couple other ones. He was talking about fishing with the gear guys, right? That's an important thing for him.
Yeah.
So anyways, there's lots of good tips there. But what about your biggest, what do you know which episode was your most listened to or most popular?
No, I don't actually. I haven't looked.
No. What about your most enjoyable one? Or the one that you remember? Or does one stick out?
Gosh, that's a good one. The last one was really good with Ian and Charity Rudder, and they're
that was the park one, right?
Yeah, in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and I think part of that was because that was really the first one that I got back in the truck and drove over back to Townsend, where I spent a ton of time up there fishing in the park, like several days a week when we lived over there. I'd fish in the park. And I got back in the truck and drove over there, and it's just good to get out. It's really my first one back, and after COVID. And I said, I'm taking a road trip. I drove over and back in a day, which is it's about 8 hours on the road.
Yeah.
And then,
oh wow.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good haul over there. By the time you stop and all that, it's probably closer to 8 hours on the road. It just, I called my buddy that taught me, a whole ton of stuff of what I know, and talked to him on the phone for probably 45 minutes on the way back. So it was just, that made that one a little bit special. But I think the big thing there was Ian and Charity they gave up some information that if you listen to it with a critical ear of, I'm going to take what they tell me and use it, you're going to be better when you come off of it. Next trip you take to the Smokies, or any, even if you go up in Cherokee National Forest, it's kind of the same types of water coming off the mountains and stuff. You're going to be better if you'll just listen and use it. I mean, they gave up some good, usable information.
Nice. Okay, I'll put a link out to that one as well in the show notes. So, okay, as we kind of take it out of here, I guess one last podcasting question, then we'll get into the 222. So if somebody's listening right now and they're thinking, man, it'd be kind of cool to start a new podcast maybe in the fly fishing space, what sort of advice would you give that person? Anything you've learned over the last few years doing your show?
Some days I'd say take up drinking instead.
Has it been hard? I mean, your process, are you pretty much doing everything? Do you do the editing, all parts of it?
I do everything other than, Lips and Host It. That's the only outside source that I really have going on. That's why I think that's why I'm so thankful for the folks that are in the group that drive it in the Facebook group, because they took that load off of me for the most part, of trying, that's one piece that I could say, all right, this is going to help people and I know they want to listen. So it's not like, hey, I want to listen to this and I want to, do these things. It's better that way. But if I was going to tell them something, I would say, do it today. Start today. If you've got a phone, and everybody, let's face it, has got a phone, set the phone down in front of you, write up a script of just do 5 minutes and talk into the phone about those things that you have listed on that piece of paper, right? So list out some notes, talk through those notes. Don't listen to that first one, delete it as soon as you do it, and do another one. And just get used to talking in the mic, because it's not easy to do, and it's in the editing, and how many times have you, and I know this happened to me on the Eating and Charity podcast, on the R&R, the Smokies. I set up everything. I said, well, let's just do a test. I had tested it the night before. Everything was good. We tested it for about 5 minutes, and nothing worked. How many times have you had that happen?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody has.
It's the tech. The tech is the X factor.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. And an hour later, we were recording, but it took an hour. I mean, that was an hour out of their day of me sitting there sweating, trying to figure out. So, try to be ready. And that's happened more than once to me. So maybe I'm not good at tech.
No, it happens. It happens. I mean, I've had it. You'll have it dialed in, everything's good, and then even this morning. I mean, I use a software typically that I record through Skype. It's called Call Recorder, and it works great. I mean, it's amazing. And this morning it didn't work. I mean, I have no idea what. I probably just need to reboot it, reinstall something or whatever. But so instead, we're recording both ends. You're recording your side, and I'm recording mine, which is actually the best way to do it. That'll be the cleanest audio, anyways. You
know what the crazy thing though is, Dave? We may stop right here and be done and think we've got something, and one of us something didn't take.
Yeah, well, and here's another tip. Is that always do double whatever that you want. Like right now, I'm recording on the H6, but I'm also recording into my my DAW, my digital workstation, whatever. Right. So
yeah.
I've got two things I'm recording on, and typically, yeah, I mean that's whenever you can. Just I'm trying to think of the name of the word, but trying to have double repetition. So
back
so you
up,
got it covered.
Back up to the backup.
Yeah, backup to backup. Yeah. So. And yeah, the worst case, I mean, obviously, and I've done this a couple times where you have to re-record with a guest. That's not something you want to do. But, I mean, typically, if you have, I think I've done that once or twice.
I think I've done it twice already,
yeah,
and I don't have near as many
twice.
episodes as you do.
Yep. Yeah. So I've done it. I mean, and it's just part of the game. So, okay. Well, let's wrap it out of here with the finish that up on the 222. And you mentioned maybe two flies you talked about the, What were the two you mentioned today? I mean, obviously the woolly bugger, but what was the other one that's kind of like a woolly bugger?
Tequila.
Yeah, tequila. So and the Zoo Cougar.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of good ones. What about on, and you have thrown out some good tips here. So let's take it back to the water again. We're at that pool. We're trying to get up a smallmouth with a fly. Any other tips you want to throw out there to help somebody?
Yeah, I think this works. Two things. And this is where, again, I'm probably different. And my friends, I think my friends make fun of me, and my guide friends can't believe I do this. But, and this may go more for trout, but if I am nymphing for trout or if I'm nymphing for smallmouth, I use one nymph. That's it. Everybody else uses two. I use one because I try to focus so much on presentation. I'm not saying I never use two, but I would say 90% of the time we're on one fly. Doesn't matter if I'm fishing with you or I have a client in the boat. It doesn't matter to me. I'm trying to fish one fly and get exactly that right presentation. But the flip side of that is when I'm fishing streamers, unless it's a Zoo Cougar, but if I've got a couple of woolly buggers or tequila flies or something, I'll tie 2 or 3 streamers on. Right.
No kidding.
Yeah. So I'm kind of the opposite of everybody else. But I don't know. And I started the multiple streamers for the shad kills around here on the trout streams, and just have kind of tried to bring it, forward with me. I haven't really done it on the musky stuff yet, although I've wanted to. But you got to go pretty small. Even with 10 weights, you still have to go pretty small. But it's not that it's not doable. But if you're thinking about bait fish, like small 2-inch bait fish, hardly ever see one just kind of running around out there. They school up a little bit. So that's kind of where that started. I don't know if I probably stole that idea from somewhere.
No, is this 2 flies? Is this 2 flies? Yeah. So you're putting 2, and would you have like 2 Zoo Cougars on there?
No, I wouldn't do 2 Zoo Cougars, but I'll do a Zoo Cougar and a couple of woolly buggers too. So it's not just 2. I'll do 2, 3, 4.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you put them on there. And so how do you keep that from, getting tangled and all that? And what type of dropper or how are you tying on? If you had 3 flies, how would you be tying those on?
So I would tie the first one on with a surgeon's loop. And then I call it the fisherman's knot. Tie a fisherman's knot to the bend of the hook on the first streamer.
Yeah.
And the fisherman's knot to the eye, fisherman's knot to the bend, fisherman's knot to the eye.
Oh, so so basically you got a lead fly, then you got off the eye of that hook, you've got another little tag with a fly, and then you've got your dropper off the bend, and then off of that dropper eye of the hook, you got another one?
I got it's eye bend, eye bend, eye bend.
Eye bend, yep. Eye bend. Oh, wow. So you can, that's amazing.
You can tie as many as you want to.
God, that's crazy.
How
and
good
then
are you?
Yeah. How far between the bend, from your main fly down to the second fly, is that like 12 inches or something or longer?
So I don't ever really have them exactly the same spacing. I might have one that's 5 or 6 inches and the next one may be 2 foot back there, or they may be all kind of relatively, about a foot apart. But when you fishing 2 is easy. Fishing 3 is a little bit harder. Fishing 4 and 5, you got to really have somebody that's good. That really can like lob it like a softball, kind of open up their loop and just kind of let it drop in there. And you got 5 on there. That's 5 splashes hitting all at once, and it gets a fish's attention. But you probably spook fish too. But it's interesting to see which one they eat in the line. So if you've got 3, sometimes they'll eat the back one, sometimes they'll eat the middle one. Interestingly, very seldom do that if I've seen them eat the front one. Not that they don't, it's just they're eating those back 2 a little more, which is crazy. Okay. You would think they would eat that first one, but they just don't.
What about, and as we finish up here, as far as a resource, other than, say, Kelly Gallup, any other resources you'd direct somebody to kind of take this conversation a little further? I'm not sure if there's like book, magazines, videos, anything you can think of.
So I would say, obviously, listen to podcasts, and not just Southeastern Fly podcast either.
Yeah. Do you listen? Are you a big podcaster? Do you listen to any other podcasts or fly fishing podcasts?
Yeah, I've got yours. I've got. You want me to read through here and tell you what I've got?
Yeah, let's hear it. Let's
just see what I'm listening to.
Yeah.
Fly Fishing 97 podcast.
Oh yeah, Mark.
Yeah. I've got one of the Fishing Business podcast.
Oh,
she's pretty good.
Business. Oh yeah,
that's a good
business,
one.
Right.
Something called Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing podcast.
There you go. Wet Fly Swing. I've heard of that one before.
Here's a Jack Daniels Around the Barrel podcast, which is pretty cool because we fish down at the Elk, and it's you're 10 minutes from the distillery down there.
Oh, that's cool.
And you can smell the mash on the floats, so that's pretty cool.
No kidding.
Yeah. Ask about Fly Fishing podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Rogers.
Yeah, Roger.
He's been around. His podcast, I should say, he's been around forever.
Oh,
his podcast has been around forever.
No, he has. He's been around forever. Yeah, Roger. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's where he had like 2 hours with Kelly one time, and I was like, hey, there's some good stuff on this. But the clubs is a great place. That's a great resource for people to learn. So there's a club here in Murfreesboro called Cavalry Outfitters, which is starting to crank back up after COVID. And just a great group of guys. Just a great group. And those guys, and it's a men's fly fishing thing. But hang around because I'll tell you about the next one too. That's going to get on the other side of that. But good group of guys, support each other, give up information pretty freely, actually. And you can always learn, and they get together and they fish together. And I try to fish with them when I can, I just don't have a lot of time to do it. But they have some guests every once in a while. They'll do presentations. We did the fly fishing film tour this year. It's just a good group of guys. So that type of club. And on the flip side of that is the Music City Fly Girls. They're a group of ladies. And I don't know if you know Susan Thrasher. She's a guide on the Caney.
No.
She started it with a friend of hers, and it's evolved. They do multiple trips a year. They have multiple outings a year around here. They have guest speakers. They'll do online events. Through COVID, they did some online events. They get together, and you'll see them. out and about together. There'll be 2 or 3 fishing here and there. So I would say that if you can find a club that's active, that it doesn't have just a bunch of people that want to come in and listen to somebody tell them everything they know, but they don't really get together and they're not close. If you can find that club that's close and gives up that information freely, I say absolutely get in there and find somebody you like to fish that you enjoy and fish with them. That's a great resource. That's a long way. That's a long-winded answer, but it's a good answer. It's a quality thing to do.
I was trying to think. We did have an episode a while back because there's a few people in your area, right? Are there any big, like, what would you say as far as big name kind of shops or people? Are there any people that come to mind out in kind of that area?
Well, the friend of mine, Susan, just wrote a book, so she comes to mind right away.
Yeah, and I have heard of her, Susan Thrash. I've definitely heard the name.
Yeah. Have you not interviewed Susan?
No.
You should.
Yeah, I will. I'll try to
she's
find
got
her.
a
I'll try to
book
track her down.
laying over there that she needs to actually sign for me.
Oh, yeah.
I'll send you her info.
Okay.
But yeah, so Susan's good. Cumberland Transit's a shop down in downtown in Nashville. Fly South's in Nashville. There's, and I'm just naming friends that are really good.
And I just found it. Let's see. It's Wanda Taylor.
Yeah, Wanda. I've interviewed Wanda. She's a little more east of here. So
more east.
She's on the Georgia.
Hiawassee.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's north Georgia and southern Tennessee. So
yeah,
Wanda's a good one. I interviewed her really early on, and she was a good interview.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Cool.
I'll tell you, if another great resource is David Knapp. He's I've been fishing with David for 10 years, maybe more, probably more than that. When you start getting older, you start forgetting how many years have gone by. But so definitely, he's got a website, the Trout Zone. He's been doing it for as long as I've been doing Southeastern Fly almost.
Oh, perfect. Okay, well, we're gonna get out of here, David. But give us some music before we get out of here. You're in Nashville, like the home of Elvis, right, and all that or you're nearby, right? So what do you listen to, and what type of music or bands or anything like that?
I'm pretty open, really. So now I've been kind of on Dave Matthews a little bit. There's a she's not really well known. She's not a headliner yet, but Jessica Willis Fisher. She's more along the country line.
Great.
Love John Prine.
Oh yeah, John Prine.
The Lumineers.
Oh yeah, Lumineers. Yep. You've mentioned 3. I try to ask this question whenever I can because I love putting in a little YouTube video of whoever we talk about. But yeah, 3 of those, John Prine, Lumineers, and Dave Matthews. I've had guests that have all said that. I haven't had Jessica Willis. What was the last name? Jessica
Willis Fisher.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'll definitely check out that, and if I can, I'll put a link to some. Yeah,
probably the one that I listen to the most, and have listened to this guy for a long time before I started fishing. Really, Buffett, Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah, Jimmy. You gotta love Jimmy.
And I like him for several different reasons. One, he's a writer, so him and Prine kind of were in the early years. They kind of hooked up with Steve Goodman some and did some work there. But he's a fantastic writer, and I don't just mean of songs. I mean of books. His books are outstanding. He can take you through a story, and they're mostly in the Caribbean, so kind of who doesn't like that? But he also fly fishes. I mean,
he does.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So
he's a good. Well, there's a guest to get on the show. Get Jimmy Buffett.
That'd be one that I would love to get, and I would really like to talk fly fishing with him and just see, hey, tell me of some of the places you've been. And I think if you could ever get him in, it would be a great story.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, Jimmy Buffett would be huge. That'd be an epic interview for sure. So.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, David. Well, I think that's about all we have. We'll send people out to, I guess the best place is your website, right?
Yeah, I think Southeastern Fly, but you can, southeasternfly.com, Instagram. I just posted something this morning on Instagram. The Fly Fishing Podcast by Southeastern Fly Facebook group. That's a great place. And Southeastern Fly on Facebook. Don't do anything on Twitter. I've kind of stopped doing that. And just if you have any questions, email me or text or whatever, however you want to do it.
Yeah, perfect.
I don't have to guide you to help you.
No, I think we've talked about enough resources here, I think, to give somebody a good start. So,
yeah.
All right, David, well, I'll put links to all that in the show notes. And, just want to thank you for coming on and sharing your knowledge. We'll definitely look forward to keeping in touch with you as we're kind of heading forward on everything we have going. And, yeah, man, thanks for taking the time today.
All right, Dave. Hey, man, I appreciate it, and look forward to having you on my show talking a little bit of steelhead.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, brother.
So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes, all links, and everything else we covered today, just head over to wetflyswing.com/232. And just a reminder, please subscribe if you haven't already, and this will make sure that you get that next podcast episode that's coming out right to your inbox. And you don't want to miss the next episode because we have the great Ed Jaworowski, who's here to break down fly casting, and he is going to break this down step by step. There's tons of good tips. He's got a new book out that a lot of people are talking about, so you don't want to miss this one Tuesday. So head bang, smash that subscribe button, give it a whack. Make sure you get notified. They'll make sure you get that episode right to your inbox on Tuesday morning, first thing. That's it today. That's a wrap. That's all I have for you. Thanks again for sticking around to the very end here, and look forward to catching up with you soon. Hopefully, maybe catching you on the river or online.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.